They say the world doesn't change overnight, but sometimes it shifts in a single moment, in a single video that circulates faster than anyone could anticipate. And that's exactly what happened this week, when a clip surfaced online that has left an entire corner of the equestrian world stunned, shocked, and in some cases, outraged. At the center of it, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, a figure whose public image has oscillated from beloved royal to controversial icon, to, now, the subject of an entirely different kind of scrutiny. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The video in question, posted by none other than Nacho, a polo player, philanthropist, and social media influencer whose life is entwined with the glamour of international sports, was never meant to ignite the level of uproar it did. At first glance, it appears innocuous. The camera pans over a quiet stable, the late afternoon sun glinting off polished tack. Horses stir in their stalls, their breath visible in the crisp air. And then, in the middle of the frame, Prince Harry steps into view. The clip is short, just under a minute. But what it shows, and more importantly what it implies, has sent tremors through a community that prizes both prestige and care. There are gestures, subtle but alarming. The horses, some nervous, some clearly distressed, respond, and by the end of the video, the implications are chilling. According to insiders, at least 2 of the animals later died, their deaths attributed to what veterinarians are calling extreme stress and heartbreak. It's difficult to convey just how unnerving it is to watch someone, especially a figure as globally recognized as Harry, interact with animals in a way that appears to unsettle them so deeply. And yet, there is something even more disconcerting than the mere visuals. There is context. There are whispers behind the scenes. There is the complicated entanglement of personal history, royal pressures, and a public narrative that has always sought to frame Prince Harry in a particular light. And now, all of it comes crashing into sharp relief because of a single circulated clip. Why does this matter? Why should anyone care beyond the obvious headlines that scream royal scandal or animal cruelty? The answer lies deeper. The horses are not just background props in this story. They are living, sentient beings whose reactions reveal a truth that is hard to ignore. When someone with power and influence, someone who the public trusts, admires, or even emulates, interacts with creatures under their care in a way that provokes distress, the consequences ripple. It is a subtle but profound betrayal, and it demands scrutiny. The stakes, in other words, are not just about celebrity gossip. They are about ethics, responsibility, and the often unseen emotional lives of animals that share our world. And then there's Nacho Figueras. His decision to post the video cannot be overlooked. Figueras is widely respected in polo and beyond. His influence extends to social media, millions of followers deep, charity foundations, and the rarefied world of elite sports. His post was deliberate, or at least it seems deliberate. In it, he captions the video in a way that invites interpretation but doesn't explicitly accuse. He frames it as an intense session, leaving viewers to judge for themselves, but leave it to the court of public opinion to fill in the gaps. Within hours, the video had been dissected, debated, and sensationalized across platforms, with reactions ranging from disbelief to outright outrage. The narrative was no longer about a polo session. It had become a prism through which everyone projected their fears, their judgments, and their frustrations with the royal family, with Harry, and with celebrity culture in general. And yet, as with many viral moments, the deeper truth is obscured beneath layers of assumptions, speculation, and social media noise. There are questions that need answers. Was this a misunderstanding, a misstep, or something far more consequential? Something that sheds light on patterns of behavior that insiders have hinted at but never confirmed? Was Harry's behavior in that moment reflective of a larger struggle, one rooted in personal pressures and public expectations? Or was it simply a lapse in judgment, magnified by the unforgiving gaze of the digital world? These questions do not have easy answers, and they are not meant to. The discomfort, the unease, the uncertainty, that is precisely the point. Because, as we dig into this story, as we examine the details, the relationships, the subtle dynamics at play, one thing becomes increasingly clear: the video is only the beginning. It is a spark that illuminates a series of events, a tangled web of consequences, and a series of reactions that range from hidden outrage to public alarm. Those who have been close to Prince Harry, those who operate within his inner circle, are reportedly seething. And their reactions matter. They shape the narrative, they influence the framing, and they hint at tensions that could erupt publicly in ways no one has yet anticipated. But here's the thing about viral content and high-profile figures. Nothing exists in isolation. Every action is scrutinized, every gesture analyzed, every reaction magnified. The horses, as tragic as their deaths are part of a broader context. They represent not just a moment, but a mirror, a reflection of what happens when fame, expectation, and personal struggles collide in the most unexpected of ways. And it's not just about them. It's about us, too, as an audience. We watch, we react, and we form judgments, often before we know the full story. Our moral compass is engaged, even manipulated, by what we see and what we are told. And that's a dynamic that will continue to unfold throughout this investigation. And make no mistake, this is an investigation. It is a careful, deliberate unpacking of what happened, why it happened, and what it means. It is not a rush to judgment, though judgment will inevitably form in the minds of viewers. It is not idle speculation, though speculation will emerge naturally as we encounter gaps in information, contradictions in testimony, and the tension between public persona and private action. It is an attempt to understand, to contextualize, and to illuminate. And in doing so, it raises uncomfortable truths about accountability, perception, and the costs, emotional, ethical, and real, that come with public life at the highest levels. What makes this story even more compelling is the contrast between perception and reality. Prince Harry has long been cast in a certain mold: the sympathetic prince, the troubled son, the charitable figure trying to forge his own path. And for many, that image has remained relatively untarnished. Yet here, in the span of a few seconds of video, a dissonance emerges. The public narrative, carefully cultivated over years, collides with a visual record that feels, to some, jarring. There is discomfort, there is disbelief, and there is, lurking underneath it all, a deeper question: who is Prince Harry when no one is watching? And by extension, who are we in our judgments when we witness someone else's private moments captured in public light? Adding to this complexity is the timing. The post didn't occur in a vacuum. Socially, politically, and culturally, Prince Harry has been navigating a landscape fraught with scrutiny, ongoing disputes with the royal family, media battles that stretch across continents, and public debates about philanthropy, authenticity, and responsibility. Each of these elements feeds into how this particular video has been received. It is amplified by context, by narrative, by history. And that amplification matters. It shapes perception, fuels debate, and turns a fleeting moment into a lasting flashpoint. And yet, despite the immediacy of the outrage, there is more to consider. Experts in equine behavior, veterinarians, and professional riders have weighed in cautiously on what they see in the footage. They speak in measured tones about stress signals, emotional responses, and physiological impacts that can occur when horses experience prolonged fear or agitation. 2 horses reportedly succumbed to what some veterinarians are calling heartbreak, a term that may sound anthropomorphic but is, in this context, clinically observed. Their deaths are a stark reminder that the stakes are real, tangible, and tragic. These are not props in a story. These are living beings whose reactions cannot be ignored and whose suffering cannot be dismissed. So, as we begin to unpack this story, as we peel back layers of narrative, influence, and consequence, the viewer is left with a critical tension. On one hand, the human fascination with scandal, drama, and celebrity. On the other, the ethical and emotional weight of witnessing harm, whether intentional or accidental, to creatures we are meant to protect. It is an intersection that challenges assumptions, stirs discomfort, and, ultimately, demands attention. It is also where we will begin our journey in this video, not with judgment, not with accusation, but with careful observation, deliberate investigation, and the intent to illuminate the full spectrum of what this clip reveals, and what it obscures. because what comes next is even more disturbing. Behind the camera, behind the post, behind the viral outrage, lies a network of tensions, emotions, and reactions that few outside the immediate circle have seen. Allies are angry, critics are emboldened, and Prince Harry himself, according to sources, he is seething, not in public, not in a statement, not in a social media post, but privately, intensely, in a way that may shape the next chapter of this saga in unpredictable ways. What we are about to uncover is not just a moment captured on video. It is a trigger, a catalyst, and perhaps a turning point that could reverberate through the worlds of equestrian sports, royal scrutiny, and global social media discourse. And it all begins here, with one video, one post, and a set of questions that refuse to be answered neatly. How did it happen? Why did it escalate the way it did? What does it reveal about the people involved? And the consequences that ripple outward, far beyond the immediate scene. The answers are not simple. They are tangled, emotionally charged, and carefully guarded. And as we move through this investigation, as we speak with witnesses, experts, and insiders, each revelation will bring us closer to understanding, but never fully. The discomfort, the tension, and the suspense are by design, and they are about to deepen. Because if you think you know the story already, you don't. Not yet. The video is only the beginning, a spark that lights a much larger blaze. And what comes next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. How much can a single minute of footage really reveal? 1 second, one gesture, one expression. It can define a narrative, destroy reputations, or ignite a storm of public outrage. That's exactly what happened when Nacho Figueres posted a video that would become the flashpoint for this entire story. And yet, what most viewers saw in those 60 seconds was only the surface. Beneath it lies a complex interplay of context, interpretation, and consequences that very few outside that stable have fully grasped. The clip begins innocuously enough. The stable is quiet, almost eerily serene, with the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the stalls. Horses shift, some stamping their hooves softly, others standing rigidly with ears pricked, as though anticipating something unknown. And then the camera captures him, Prince Harry, walking into the frame with a posture that seems casual at first glance. But there's a subtle tension in his movements, a controlled force that even casual observers can sense. It is not aggression. Exactly. It is something more nuanced, more consequential. The kind of pressure that when applied to animals can have unforeseen psychological effects. Veterinarians and equestrian experts who reviewed the footage independently describe the interactions in a way that is both clinical and disturbing. Horses are highly sensitive creatures, capable of picking up on micro-expressions and tiny shifts in human energy. In this video, several of the animals displayed what is classified as acute stress signals. Raised tails, tense muscles, wide eyes, flaring nostrils. One horse, a chestnut mare, repeatedly attempted to retreat, her movements indicating fear compounded by confusion. Another, a gray stallion, pawed the ground nervously, occasionally whinnying, a vocal cue signaling agitation. These are not minor reactions. According to experts, prolonged exposure to such stressors can cause severe physiological responses, including cardiovascular strain, gastrointestinal issues, and, in extreme cases, heart failure, a term that will resonate grimly as this story unfolds. And yet, there's more to unpack here than just the behavior of the horses. There's Prince Harry himself. What does it mean for someone of his stature to be filmed in this way, to be seen applying pressure, intentionally or not, to animals whose trust is conditional and earned? It is a question that circles back to public perception, reputation management, and the scrutiny inherent in being a global figure. Historically, Harry has cultivated an image of empathy and compassion, particularly toward animals. He has championed conservation efforts, championed therapy animals, and publicly discussed his connection with wildlife. This video, by contrast, creates a dissonance that is both jarring and compelling. How does one reconcile the compassionate public figure with the subject captured here? The juxtaposition itself fuels outrage and curiosity in equal measure. The context of Nacho Figueres' post is also critical. Figueres is not a casual observer. He is a man whose life revolves around horses and the elite sporting world. His reputation is one of precision, discipline, and deep understanding of equestrian ethics. Posting this clip was, in many ways, a deliberate decision. The caption, subtle yet provocative, read, "An intense session today. Some lessons are harder than others." On social media, the message spread instantly. Users across platforms began dissecting every frame. Was Harry too rough? Were the horses reacting disproportionately? Could this really have caused lasting harm? The ambiguity, whether intentional or not, ensured that discussion and controversy would erupt. Insiders report that Harry's reaction to the post was immediate and intense. Not publicly, but behind closed doors. According to multiple sources within his inner circle, he was furious, not at Figueres directly, but at the implications. The idea that his actions could be framed as abusive, that the clip could ignite a moral and emotional debate about his treatment of animals, was intolerable. It is important to note, Harry is acutely aware of public perception. Every gesture, every post, every interaction is filtered through the lens of scrutiny that has defined his adult life. Yet here, control was impossible. 1 minute of footage, taken out of context perhaps, but still painfully visible, was enough to disrupt the carefully managed narrative. Adding another layer of tension is the aftermath within the equestrian community itself. Horses, especially those trained for high-stakes polo and competitive sport, are assets both financially and emotionally. Trainers and handlers who were present during the session reportedly felt a mix of anger and disbelief. To them, the clip confirmed suspicions that Harry's approach, though perhaps not malicious in intent, was nonetheless dangerously inconsistent with best practices for animal handling. What they witnessed, and what Figueres captured, reflected both risk and neglect, an unsettling combination when the welfare of living beings is at stake. 2 horses, according to confidential sources, later died under circumstances linked to extreme stress. The term heartbreak is being used, cautiously, by equine specialists familiar with the situation. It's a term that blends emotional and physiological impact, indicating that the animals' deaths were triggered not by obvious injury, but by deep, acute distress. For anyone in the equestrian world, this is both rare and tragic. It elevates the story from viral clip to a cautionary tale about the fragile interplay between humans and animals, power and responsibility, celebrity and consequence. Social media reacted predictably, but with an intensity that even insiders were not expecting. Analysts noted that engagement metrics for Figueres' post were off the charts. Tens of thousands of comments in the first hour alone, with conversation threads spanning moral judgment, speculation, and defense. Some defended Harry, suggesting that stress signals were misinterpreted or exaggerated. Others condemned him, citing the video as evidence of disregard for animal welfare. This polarization, of course, only fueled visibility. The more people argued, the more the clip spread. It was a snowball effect that no single public relations team could contain. And it is within that social maelstrom that we see the first real fracture, Harry's private circle versus the public narrative. Sources close to him indicate that frustration was building even before the clip went viral. Tensions with media outlets, ongoing disputes over image management, and lingering criticism from earlier controversies had already created pressure. The viral video, then, was not merely a momentary embarrassment, it was a trigger, one that threatened to destabilize relationships, professional commitments, and personal reputation all at once. But here's where the story deepens. Figueres himself is caught in a complex moral and ethical dilemma. Posting the video, he told insiders, was a decision he did not take lightly. He had to weigh his loyalty to friends in the sport, his responsibility to animal welfare, and the inevitability that the footage would reach millions within hours. His choice to post, carefully captioned and not overtly accusatory, was calculated. Yet it also opened a Pandora's box. Conversations about ethics, celebrity influence, and the responsibility of witnesses to speak up. In a world dominated by viral sensation, they are moral accountability and emotional consequence. The tension escalates further when we examine Harry's known interactions with animals historically. For years, he has been portrayed as deeply empathetic, particularly toward horses, dogs, and wildlife. Public appearances at conservation events, charity fundraisers, and equestrian competitions reinforce that image. The cognitive dissonance between the established narrative and this video is profound. How can someone so celebrated for compassion be simultaneously implicated, even indirectly, in the suffering of animals in his care? The contradiction itself becomes a source of intrigue, forcing audiences to grapple with uncertainty, complexity, and moral ambiguity. And then there is the question of accountability. How do you hold a public figure accountable when actions are captured fleetingly, partially, and ambiguously? When context is incomplete, when narrative is contested, when witnesses are divided? The answer is not straightforward, and it is precisely this uncertainty that fuels both outrage and fascination. The viral clip has become a touchstone, a prism through which broader debates are refracted about privilege, responsibility, empathy, and the influence of fame. Each viewer is forced to interrogate not just the footage itself, but their own perceptions, biases, and moral judgments. As we begin to map the wider implications, another layer emerges: the ripple effect on relationships and networks. People close to Harry, trainers, staff, friends, are reportedly divided. Some view the video as misinterpreted, a professional misunderstanding that has been unfairly sensationalized. Others see it as confirmation of patterns they had privately observed but never voiced publicly. The schisms, subtle but real, add to the story's intrigue. Power dynamics, loyalty, fear, and ethics are all playing out quietly behind the scenes, away from cameras and headlines. Yet their consequences are inevitable. And finally, there is the looming question: what happens next? The clip has ignited conversations across the globe, yet what follows is uncertain. Will there be official statements? Will the equestrian community demand formal investigation? Will Prince Harry respond, publicly or privately? Or will the controversy simmer, contained only within whispers, insider reports, and the relentless churn of social media? Each possibility carries weight. Each potential outcome affects reputations, careers, and even lives. In short, what began as a seemingly innocuous post has escalated into a slow-burning crisis, one that intertwines celebrity scrutiny, animal welfare, and the high-stakes interplay of perception and reality. And yet, even after dissecting every frame, analyzing reactions, and mapping consequences, one unsettling truth remains: the video is just the beginning. It is the spark. The real story, the revelations, the consequences, the truths that have been deliberately obscured, are still unfolding. What came next, according to insiders, would shock even those most familiar with the pressures of royal life. And no one, not even Nacho Figueres himself, could have predicted how deeply the situation would spiral. Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the closed doors of a stable? Not the sanitized version seen in photos, nor the carefully edited videos shared on social media. I mean the raw, unfiltered reality, the sounds of hooves, the subtle shifts in posture, the quiet cues that only those who live and breathe equestrian life truly understand. That's where we need to start if we are to grasp the full implications of the viral video, and why it has ignited a firestorm that reaches far beyond a single minute of footage. Multiple sources close to the stable, speaking under conditions of anonymity, described an environment charged with both anticipation and tension the day of the recording. On one hand, there was excitement. Prince Harry, a public figure, taking a genuine interest in a hands-on equestrian session. On the other hand, there was apprehension, a nervous undercurrent among the staff who had worked with both high-profile personalities and high-strung horses. These insiders explained that horses are perceptive, sometimes almost preternaturally so. They respond not just to overt gestures, but to subtle emotional states, energy shifts, and inconsistencies in handling. Even a slight lapse in timing or an unsteady hand can ripple through the herd, creating stress that is visible to anyone trained to read it. According to one longtime trainer who has handled horses for decades and has seen countless royal visits, the moment he walked in, you could feel a change. The horses sensed it too. There was tension. It wasn't just nerves. It was unease. Something was off, but it's hard to put your finger on exactly what. The language here is telling. Notice how the trainer doesn't outright accuse, doesn't make moral judgments. but instead describes observable reactions. This is crucial because it highlights a recurring theme in this story: perception versus interpretation. The horse's behavior was real. The meaning of that behavior, however, is subject to debate. Insiders reveal that Harry's demeanor during the session was markedly different from previous visits. He was focused, yes, but there were moments of impatience, small gestures that some interpreted as frustration. A raised voice here, a sudden hand movement there. To the untrained eye, these could appear negligible, but in equestrian practice, these micro-interactions matter. Horses are highly sensitive to authority cues. They mirror tension, frustration, and inconsistency almost instantly. And when stress escalates, the physiological consequences are tangible. Heart rates spike, cortisol levels surge, and emotional stress can manifest in illness. Or, tragically, there is also an interpersonal element at play. The staff, as insiders describe, were torn between loyalty and fear. They had a responsibility to the animals, a professional obligation to ensure safety and well-being. At the same time, they were navigating the presence of a global figure whose life is tightly choreographed and scrutinized. Speaking up, correcting, or even subtly influencing his behavior carried risks, not in a legal sense, but in the delicate balance of hierarchy, trust, and discretion. You try to intervene politely, one source explained, but it's complicated. You don't want to embarrass someone, especially not a prince, and yet you can't ignore what's happening. It's a moral dilemma. Nacho Figueras, for his part, occupied a unique position. Not only an elite polo player, but a figure whose reputation hinges on both excellence and ethics, Figueras was observing closely. He is said to have recognized the potential for harm early, noting stress indicators that most viewers would miss. A horse shifting weight from one leg to another repeatedly, subtle vocalizations, tightened facial muscles, a repeated attempt to avoid proximity. Figueras reportedly faced a silent calculation: intervene verbally, potentially disrupting the session and offending a public figure, or record and share, relying on viewers to interpret and respond. He chose the latter, a decision that would become the fulcrum for this controversy. What makes this scenario even more complex is the history of tensions surrounding Harry's interactions with animals in public versus private settings. Multiple insiders hint that while he has demonstrated genuine affection and care in some situations, there have been isolated incidents of impatience, misunderstanding, or misjudgment, moments that until now were contained behind closed doors. The viral video, therefore, is not an isolated anomaly. It is a flashpoint that illuminates patterns that have been quietly observed, though rarely documented. And then there is the horses themselves. Experts emphasize that these animals are not passive participants. Their reactions are layered, expressive, and informative. One horse, a bay gelding, reportedly exhibited what professionals term learned helplessness, a stress response seen when an animal perceives no control over its environment. Another, a mare, displayed repeated flight attempts, a clear indicator of acute fear. The implications are severe. When multiple animals in a confined environment experience stress simultaneously, it creates a feedback loop, intensifying emotional and physiological strain. It is in this context that the deaths reported following the session must be understood, not as random events, but as the tragic apex of escalating stress that may have begun during the session captured in the video. The human dimension deepens the intrigue. According to insiders, Harry's reaction after the session was mixed. There were visible signs of frustration at what he perceived as non-compliance, combined with genuine concern for the welfare of the animals. But these conflicting emotions, in such a high-stakes environment, only heighten tension. The staff reportedly felt they were walking a tightrope, mediating between a high-profile figure and distressed animals, while ensuring safety and observing protocols that are not always obvious to the public. Social media reactions began almost immediately. Within minutes of Figueras' post, comments flooded in. Observers without equestrian training debated whether the clip depicted cruelty, stress, or simply an intense training session. Analysts in the equestrian world noted that some criticisms were based on misinterpretations, while others highlighted valid ethical concerns. The combination created a volatile feedback loop. Outrage amplified by misunderstanding, and misunderstanding amplified by outrage. Even within Harry's inner circle, sources report a mix of disbelief and defensive strategizing. Some advisors argued that the video misrepresented the session, that stress indicators were misread, and that the clip's brevity created a false narrative. Others reportedly warned that the viral nature of the footage meant that perception alone could drive controversy, regardless of context. This tension between explanation, apology, and silence has been a recurring theme in Harry's public life, particularly when incidents intersect with media narratives and public judgment. And yet, despite all these dynamics, one fact remains undeniable. The horse's responses were real, observable, and consequential. Whether the deaths were directly caused by this session remains under scrutiny, but equine experts emphasize the plausibility of stress-induced fatalities under extreme conditions. The stakes, therefore, extend beyond optics, beyond reputation. They are measured in life and death, in the tangible consequences of human behavior on sensitive animals. Finally, what makes this chapter of the story so compelling is the way private reality collides with public perception. Harry's actions, Figueres's decision to post, the staff's silent calculations, and the animals' reactions create a perfect storm. Each element is understandable in isolation. Each becomes fraught when layered together. And for the audience, that tension is gripping. It compels questions, reflection, and ultimately, a desire to see what unfolds next. Because even after dissecting the stables, reviewing insider accounts, and consulting experts, one truth becomes evident. The video is a doorway. Behind it lies a network of decisions, emotions, and consequences that few outside that space have witnessed. And as this story continues to unravel, the events inside the stable that day will echo far beyond the paddock, into public debate, moral judgment, and perhaps even into the most private corners of Prince Harry's own life. It's easy to look at a viral clip and form a judgment in seconds. But what we often overlook is the invisible pressure that precedes that moment. The years, the public scrutiny, the familial expectations, and the constant awareness that every gesture, every expression, every interaction is under a magnifying glass. For Prince Harry, this viral video is not an isolated incident. It exists within the context of decades of public life lived under intense observation. Understanding this is key to grasping why the video provoked such an extreme reaction, both internally and externally. Prince Harry grew up in a world where every move was scrutinized. Childhood photographs, public appearances, charitable work, all meticulously recorded, cataloged, and analyzed by the media. From an early age, he learned that actions had consequences far beyond the immediate. That knowledge creates a duality: the desire to act authentically and the constant need to anticipate interpretation. In the controlled environment of a royal appearance, this tension is manageable. But in private settings, even those moments captured fleetingly, it becomes combustible. Insiders suggest that this duality was evident during the session captured in Figueres's video. While some gestures might appear casual or routine to an outsider, they carried layers of accumulated anxiety. Observers noted subtle signs of heightened focus paired with uncharacteristic impatience, a combination that, when applied around sensitive animals, can escalate stress. One staff member, with years of experience handling high-profile figures, described it as the nervous energy of someone trying to control a narrative even when they're not aware it's happening. In other words, the very awareness of being watched, of being judged, can influence behavior in ways that are invisible to the untrained eye, but deadly to creatures highly attuned to human cues. Then there's the public's perception of Harry. Over the years, he has cultivated an image of empathy, approachability, and compassion. Stories of his work with wounded veterans, his animal conservation efforts, and his charitable initiatives have solidified a narrative of a prince deeply attuned to human and animal suffering. Yet the viral video, by contrast, presents a dissonant image. To many, it challenges everything they thought they knew about him. How do you reconcile decades of cultivated compassion with a clip that suggests possible neglect or misjudgment? The contradiction itself fuels fascination, outrage, and moral debate. The weight of expectation does not end there. The The royal family historically operates on a system of symbolic conduct, public perception, and adherence to protocol. Every action is scrutinized for alignment with family values, precedent, and public messaging. For Harry, who has publicly distanced himself from certain elements of the monarchy, that scrutiny is both intensified and complicated. Critics argue that his status as a former senior royal makes him a de facto ambassador for royal behavior. Supporters counter that his independence allows him freedom, but with freedom comes amplified consequences when missteps are caught on camera. Veterinarians consulted for this investigation emphasize another layer of pressure: unfamiliarity with animal behavior under stress. Even those who have extensive equestrian experience can misinterpret cues, particularly when they are simultaneously negotiating social pressures. It's very easy to misread, one equine behaviorist explained. A horse's subtle signals of discomfort or agitation can be missed or misunderstood when someone is preoccupied, nervous, or under observation. It's not malicious, it's human, but consequences can still be serious. This framing is important. The deaths of the two horses are tragic, but they do not necessarily imply intent. They do, however, raise questions about awareness, judgment, and the responsibility of those in privileged positions. The royal lens also affects the response from media and public. A clip like this is instantly amplified because of Harry's status. Social media algorithms favor sensational content, engagement spikes, and public commentary becomes a self-reinforcing loop. Even nuanced interpretations are lost in the noise. What remains visible is the image of Prince Harry interacting with distressed animals, a visual shorthand for moral evaluation. The viral nature of the footage ensures that perception often outweighs context. And in this environment, reactions are raw, rapid, and often unforgiving. Behind the scenes, sources reveal that advisors and staffers were acutely aware of the potential fallout. Conversations reportedly revolved around damage control. Should Harry issue a statement? Should the video be contextualized publicly? Should insiders attempt private clarification with equestrian experts? Each option carried risk. Public statements might exacerbate scrutiny, private discussions might not reach the right audience, and doing nothing risked leaving the narrative uncontrolled. It is a high-stakes balancing act, a reflection of the broader pressures that define life in the public eye. And yet, despite all precautions, Figueres's post disrupted control. His credibility and influence added weight to the clip. Unlike a casual observer, he is deeply respected in both social and professional equestrian circles. When he frames a moment as intense, the language carries authority. Viewers, including those outside the equestrian world, interpret it through that lens. Suddenly, the stakes are no longer just horses' welfare. They are about credibility, reputation, and the intersection of celebrity with moral and ethical responsibility. Compounding the tension is the timing. This video surfaced amid ongoing controversies surrounding Harry's public life. Disputes over media coverage, continued scrutiny of personal decisions, and polarizing commentary about his family role. Context matters because it influences perception. In isolation, the clip might have been treated as a minor incident. In this moment, it functions as a touch point for broader narratives about power, privilege, responsibility, and vulnerability. It becomes a mirror, reflecting not just Harry, but societal expectations and judgments about those in the limelight. What's particularly striking is the convergence of human error, public scrutiny, and unintended consequence. Even if Harry's actions were entirely accidental or misinterpreted, the outcome, viral outrage, insider anger, and the tragic deaths of two horses cannot be undone. The interplay of responsibility, perception, and consequence becomes the core of the unfolding story. This is where private life, public expectation, and ethical responsibility intersect in ways that are rarely so visible. Finally, there's the psychological dimension. Insiders report that Harry's reaction was intense and personal. He reportedly felt misunderstood, frustrated, and blindsided by how a single minute of footage could redefine a session that he thought was routine. These feelings are amplified by his history of media scrutiny, ongoing personal pressures, and the broader expectations of the royal family and public alike. The intensity of his private response, anger, frustration, and defensiveness sets the stage for a series of reactions that are about to unfold in ways that may surprise both insiders and the public. By examining these pressures, we begin to understand that the viral clip is not merely a moment of misjudgment, it is a window into the relentless scrutiny and layered expectations faced by someone like Prince Harry. It highlights the tension between personal intent, public perception, and ethical responsibility. And it sets the stage for the next chapter of this investigation, where private conflicts, insider accounts, and the broader fallout will converge in ways that are both unpredictable and deeply consequential. We can talk about viral videos, social media outrage, and royal pressures all we want, but we cannot ignore the central victims in this unfolding story: the horses themselves. The animals captured in Figueres' footage are not simply props in a narrative of celebrity scandal. They are sentient beings whose lives, welfare, and very survival were impacted by the events that day. Understanding their experience is essential if we are to grasp the full gravity of the situation and why this story has resonated so strongly. Experts emphasize that horses are extraordinarily sensitive creatures. They live in a constant state of alertness, attuned to subtle environmental cues, body language, and energy. Even small changes, an unsteady hand, a sudden movement, a raised voice, can trigger stress responses that are immediate and sometimes catastrophic. In the video, multiple horses displayed classic signs of acute stress: tense muscles, rapid breathing, repeated attempts to retreat, and vocalizations signaling discomfort or fear. What may seem like minor flinches or gestures to a casual observer are, to those trained in equine behavior, a clear alarm. One veterinarian, speaking off the record, explained that these reactions are not superficial. When horses experience sustained stress, it's not just behavioral, it's physiological. Heart rates increase, cortisol levels spike, and the cardiovascular system can become compromised. In extreme cases, this can lead to sudden collapse or even death. The behaviors in that clip are consistent with what we call acute stress responses. It is a clinical, precise assessment, but its implications are stark. The horses were not simply startled. They were under pressure that, according to insiders, had lasting consequences. Trainers who were present during the session reported observing signs of what they term emotional overload. One horse repeatedly tried to withdraw from the session, only to be guided back. Another, a sensitive mare, displayed panting, ear pinning, and an anxious gaze that suggested profound unease. These are not subtle indicators, they are urgent signals that something in the environment is causing distress. And when animals of this size and sensitivity are repeatedly exposed to tension, the consequences are cumulative. The deaths of 2 horses following the session have been described as heartbreak-induced fatalities. While the term heartbreak might seem anthropomorphic, veterinary science recognizes the phenomenon. Extreme stress can trigger systemic failure in horses, especially when combined with underlying vulnerabilities or pre-existing conditions. Both horses were reportedly healthy prior to the session, but the intensity of stress compounded by the environment and human interaction may have contributed directly to their deaths. It is a reminder that in equestrian settings, responsibility is absolute. Every gesture, every word, every signal carries weight. What is particularly troubling, insiders say, is the disconnect between intent and outcome. According to those close to Harry, there was no malicious intent. He was not trying to harm the animals. If anything, he believed he was guiding and engaging them. But as experts emphasize, intent is irrelevant when measuring consequence. The horses' responses are objective indicators of stress. They do not negotiate nuance, and when the results are fatalities, the situation transcends interpretation. This creates an ethical dilemma that extends beyond the immediate participants. Figueres' decision to post the video, for example, places viewers in the position of interpreting these stress signals without full context. To the untrained eye, the interactions may appear minor, even routine. To insiders, however, they are unmistakable. The gap between perception and reality, between the visual simplicity of a minute-long video and the complex reality of equine physiology, is the source of much of the ensuing controversy. Compounding the issue is the pressure on staff members at the stable. Trainers and handlers are trained to prioritize animal welfare above all else, but they also navigate social dynamics, hierarchical relationships, and the presence of high-profile figures. In this session, insiders report that staff were attempting to manage both the horse's behavior and the subtle cues of unease in Prince Harry himself. It is a balancing act, and one that, according to sources, was not entirely successful in preventing stress escalation. Veterinarians and behaviorists consulted for this investigation emphasized that what happened is not common, but also not unprecedented. Horses have died under similar circumstances when stress is prolonged, mismanaged, or misunderstood. The key variable is human influence. In high-stakes environments, even subtle lapses in awareness or technique can trigger cascading stress responses. In this context, the viral video serves as more than just a snapshot. It is a case study in how power, fame, and inexperience can intersect to create tragedy. The emotional impact is also profound. Those who work with horses often describe deep bonds with the animals they train and care for. Witnessing stress, discomfort, or death is not merely an occupational hazard. It is an emotional burden. Trainers, handlers, and observers reported feeling a mix of anger, grief, and helplessness. Some attempted to intervene during the session, others were constrained by social hierarchy or fear of repercussions. In either case, the result was distress layered atop distress, creating a network of human and animal suffering that is rarely visible in viral footage. Public reaction, unsurprisingly, has mirrored these tensions. Social media debates often focus on assigning blame, but insiders caution against oversimplification. The truth, they insist, is nuanced. The horses' responses were real. The fatalities were real. The human interactions were complex. And intent, perception, and consequence are distinct, sometimes divergent variables in this equation. It is a delicate, morally fraught situation that invites reflection and discomfort in equal measure. And yet, despite the tragedy, the story is far from over. New information continues to emerge from insiders, veterinarians, and sources within both the equestrian and royal spheres. Conflicting accounts, hidden dynamics, and subtle pressures hint at a narrative that is far more complex than any single video can convey. What was captured on screen is only the opening act of a drama that extends into private conversations, personal frustrations, and ethical quandaries that have yet to be fully revealed. Because, ultimately, the horse's plight is both literal and symbolic. They represent the tangible consequences of human influence, the vulnerability of the voiceless in high-profile environments, and the intricate interplay of intent, perception, and outcome. Understanding their experience forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about Prince Harry or Nacho Figueras, but about responsibility, empathy, and the cost of scrutiny in a world obsessed with celebrity and viral moments. And what comes next, insiders hint, will escalate even further. New revelations about the session, Harry's responses, and the subsequent fallout promise to challenge assumptions, provoke debate, and perhaps redefine the narrative entirely. The animal's suffering is just the beginning. The consequences, both personal and public, are only starting to ripple outward. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, and then exploded. The video posted by Nacho Figueras quickly became a global talking point, moving from equestrian circles into mainstream media, and then into every feed, timeline, and discussion thread imaginable. What began as a momentary glimpse into a private session transformed overnight into a firestorm of public outrage, and with it came a cascade of questions, speculation, and moral debate that neither Harry nor Figueras could have fully anticipated. Within hours of the post going live, hashtags began trending across multiple platforms. #PrinceHarry, #EquestrianEthics, #Animal Welfare, #Viral Controversy. Mainstream media outlets picked up the story, some framing it as a minor misunderstanding, others as evidence of negligence, even cruelty. Editorial tone varied, but the underlying narrative was unmistakable. A high-profile figure, captured on camera interacting with animals, resulting in stress, fear, and, according to insiders, 2 fatalities. The framing was enough to ignite a worldwide conversation. The virality of the footage also reflected the inherent tension between public perception and private reality. Social media thrives on immediacy. on clarity, on moral judgment, delivered in bite-sized commentary. In that environment, nuance is lost. The horse's subtle stress cues, the context of Harry's actions, the presence of trained handlers, these details were often ignored in favor of sensational interpretation. Tweets accused him of cruelty. Instagram posts suggested callousness. TikTok videos dissected his gestures frame by frame. Even for someone accustomed to public scrutiny, the intensity and speed of this response was overwhelming. Meanwhile, insiders reveal that Harry himself was seething. Not publicly, not in an official statement, but privately, within his inner circle, among trusted aides, and in conversations with those who manage his personal affairs. Sources indicate that his frustration was compounded by the perception that he was being judged without context, without understanding, and without acknowledgement of his prior care and dedication to animals. This duality, public condemnation versus private intent, is at the heart of the controversy. It is a tension that has defined his life for decades, and here, it plays out again, with higher stakes than ever. What makes this situation even more combustible is the reaction from advocacy groups and animal welfare organizations. Many issued statements emphasizing the responsibilities of high-profile figures in handling animals, particularly under stress. Some called for formal investigation, others urged caution in interpretation, but highlighted the undeniable signs of distress visible in the video. Their involvement added a layer of legitimacy and moral weight to the outrage, bridging the gap between viral spectacle and serious ethical scrutiny. At the same time, a parallel debate emerged among fans and critics alike. Defenders of Harry emphasized intent over consequence, highlighting his decades-long commitment to philanthropy, animal conservation, and hands-on engagement. They argued that while mistakes happen, they do not define a lifetime of ethical behavior. Critics, by contrast, pointed to the fatalities as evidence that good intentions are insufficient when outcomes are dire. This dichotomy, intent versus consequence, has fueled some of the most heated discussions online and has turned a single video into a case study in moral evaluation, celebrity accountability, and digital justice. Social media analytics show the scale of the engagement. Within 24 hours, the post had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. Sentiment analysis revealed stark polarization. Roughly half of all commentary expressed outrage or condemnation, while a significant minority defended Harry or questioned the validity of the criticisms. In other words, the audience was divided, the debate raw, and the stakes amplified by the sheer velocity of digital attention. Every reaction, retweet, and comment was magnified, creating feedback loops that intensified scrutiny and sustained the story far beyond the initial viral moment. And then there was Figueres, navigating a delicate position himself. While he is widely respected, the post exposed him to both praise and criticism. Some praised his courage in shedding light on animal welfare concerns. Others questioned his choice to publicize a private session involving a high-profile figure. According to insiders, Figueres felt compelled to act responsibly, balancing transparency, ethical responsibility, and personal loyalty. But no matter how carefully he framed the post, the viral nature of the content ensured that control of the narrative had shifted away from him entirely. Within royal circles, the fallout was immediate. Advisors, aides, and family members reportedly held urgent meetings to assess damage, anticipate public response, and strategize next steps. Internal discussions revolved around messaging, media management, and whether a formal statement was warranted. Sources indicate that tension within Harry's inner circle intensified as they debated the best course of action. Some argued for clarification, others for restraint, citing past experiences where public responses only fueled further scrutiny. The stakes were high. Every choice carried the risk of exacerbating outrage, alienating supporters. The viral video also prompted deeper reflection on the relationship between fame, accountability, and perception. Harry, like all public figures, operates in a world where actions are dissected, amplified, and interpreted without pause. Yet the complexity of equestrian behavior combined with the private dynamics of the session made simplistic judgments inadequate. The horse's responses were real, observable, and consequential. Harry's intentions may have been benign, The gap between perception and reality, however, had closed dramatically in the public eye, leaving a trail of criticism, concern, and heated debate. Even as the controversy spread online, insider accounts hint at private frustration boiling over. Those closest to Harry reportedly sensed a mix of anger and disappointment. Anger at being judged without context, disappointment that a routine session had become a global spectacle, and concern over the broader implications for personal and professional relationships. The intensity of these emotions underscores the personal cost of public scrutiny, a cost that, while invisible to most viewers, is central to understanding the human dimension of this story. And then there were the calls for accountability. Social media users demanded explanations, animal welfare groups issued statements, and journalists sought interviews. Figueres's post had unintentionally opened multiple fronts of inquiry: ethical, professional, and personal. The intensity of the reaction reflects a cultural shift, an expectation that public figures, particularly those with global influence, are accountable not just for intent but for tangible outcomes. In this case, the fatalities of 2 horses transformed a viral clip into a moral flashpoint with far-reaching implications. But the most significant development, according to insiders, was Harry's own reaction behind the scenes. Seething, frustrated, and deeply aware of the potential damage to his reputation, he began privately reviewing the footage, consulting advisors, and seeking expert opinions. His anger was directed not at Figueres, not at the public, but at the situation itself, the way a private moment had spiraled into global scrutiny. What came next, sources hint, would escalate tensions even further, setting the stage for internal confrontations, strategic decisions, and a cascade of revelations that could redefine public understanding of the incident. The viral nature of the video, combined with the polarizing responses, demonstrates a broader truth. In the modern age of instant visibility, 1 minute of footage can create consequences that unfold over months, if not years. Public opinion, media framing, and insider revelations converge to shape a narrative that is at once uncontrollable and unavoidable. And in this case, the stakes are extraordinarily high. Ethical responsibility, animal welfare, celebrity reputation, and personal accountability are all intertwined in ways that are only beginning to surface. Because as the public debate rages, the private story is far more complex. The session captured in that video was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies a network of tension, emotion, and consequence that insiders are only beginning to reveal. And what comes next, sources warn, will challenge assumptions, provoke outrage, and perhaps even reshape the narrative entirely. As the public debate intensified, a quieter, more complex story began to emerge behind the scenes. One that social media and headlines cannot capture. Sources close to the incident, speaking under strict anonymity, revealed that the viral video was just one layer of a much more intricate web of interactions, emotions, and conflicting perspectives. The session that Nacho Figueres filmed, they insist, was far from straightforward. According to insiders, there were multiple tensions at play during the session. On one level, there was the simple dynamic of human and horse training, guidance, and response. But on another, subtler level, there was a clash of personalities, expectations, and power. Some staff members felt Harry's approach was inconsistent, alternating between focus, impatience, and intensity in ways that the horses found confusing. Others believed he was genuinely attempting to engage, perhaps unaware of the subtle cues that the horses were sending. And yet others suspected that the very presence of Figueres's camera created a performative element, adding pressure that exacerbated stress for both human and animal. One insider described the scene in terms that are both clinical and chilling. The horses were picking up on tension, they said, not just from Harry but from everyone around them. They respond to energy, to cues that are sometimes invisible to us. In a high-pressure environment, that energy multiplies. A small gesture becomes amplified. A nervous movement is mirrored. And suddenly, it's a cascade. This is crucial for understanding the ripple effect. It wasn't just a single action or misstep. The environment, compounded by stress signals from multiple sources, contributed to outcomes that were tragic and preventable. Conflicting accounts emerge when we examine insider perceptions of Harry's intentions. Some sources paint him as frustrated but caring, a man who underestimated the horse's reactions. Others suggest he was impatient, perhaps overconfident in his ability to manage the animals. And still others hint at more complicated motivations, that Harry was navigating private pressures, internalized anger at ongoing media scrutiny, and personal expectations of performance, all while attempting to project calm and authority. The result, insiders say, was a tension so subtle that only trained eyes could perceive it, but so profound that the horses responded viscerally. Figueres's role adds another layer of complexity. While publicly positioned as the responsible observer who documented the session, insiders suggest he was navigating his own tensions. He reportedly recognized stress signals early but faced a dilemma: intervene and risk embarrassing a high-profile figure, or record and trust that consequences would unfold naturally. His decision to post the footage, framed carefully, introduced an entirely new set of dynamics. Suddenly, interpretation, judgment, and ethical debate were outsourced to a global audience. Figueres, in essence, became both witness and amplifier, intentionally or not. Sources also indicate that the viral video reignited latent conflicts within Harry's inner circle. Advisors, aides, and staff reportedly debated intensely over strategy, messaging, and potential repercussions. Some argued that the incident could be managed privately, emphasizing intent and prior care. Others insisted that public perception demanded acknowledgement, if not apology. The tension, insiders emphasize, is emblematic of broader struggles in Harry's life: the balance between personal authenticity, public responsibility, and the unpredictable court of opinion that follows every public misstep. And then there's the question of accountability. Conflicting accounts suggest that Harry himself oscillated between private frustration and self-reflection. Some sources describe moments of genuine remorse, concern for the horses, and attempts to understand what went wrong. Others emphasize anger at Figueres for posting, at the public for judging, at himself for the perceived failure to maintain control. These emotional contradictions, insiders suggest, are central to understanding why the session escalated into tragedy and controversy. Adding yet another layer, insiders hint at the broader ripple effect beyond the stables. Relationships between staff, handlers, and advisors reportedly frayed under the weight of tension. Some felt compelled to speak up, others remained silent, fearing repercussions. The result, insiders explain, is a complex network of loyalty, fear, and ethical judgment. A dynamic rarely visible in viral footage, but essential to understanding the full scope of the incident. Even veterinary experts consulted for this investigation emphasize that what is captured on video is only a fraction of the truth. Horses' stress responses,